Hello everyone, welcome to Real Person Reviews. I'm Sam, and I'm a real person. And you know that it's Zelda month right now, and for Zelda month there are a couple of Zelda games I really wanted to review. Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. But it's kind of hard to talk about one of these games without talking about the other. So I figured I would try to kind of split this up into sort of a two-part review. So I could hit both of them, and, it's easier than trying to put it all into one huge review, since there's some stuff that crosses over. Because these games actually were released at the same time, and it's supposed to be so that you can play one of them and then play the other as the sequel to it, and you can do it in either order. So there's some stuff that crosses over, and there's some interesting things there. There's a lot of similarities, although each one is actually an entirely different quest. There are some things that will tie together, so I figured that what I was going to do is I'll just review one of them first, and I'll just talk about all of this, stuff in part one for Oracle of Ages to try and explain all these different things they did in the game, and, just try to give you a lot more of the background and the basics of everything. And then I won't have to, explain as much of it for Oracle of Seasons, and we can talk more about the interconnectivity in part two. So for part one, we're going to focus mostly on the game that I played first, and the one that I actually liked more, Legend of Zelda, Oracle of Ages. So the story is somewhat simple in Oracle of Ages. It's basically that there is an evil sorceress, Varen, that is trying to take over Nairu, who is the Oracle of Ages. So, that's where the name is. And she's trying to use Nairu's powers to, influence the queen to build this tower. And basically, her ultimate goal is to try and spread sorrow and suffering across the land. And, she ends up actually taking over the queen and building this gigantic tower, making everyone work, making it so that there's no actual night, it's just continually day, so people have to keep working. Some people are being, changed and being attacked, and all these bad things are happening, and it's all really to generate this sorrow around the world. That's the ultimate plan of Varen. And, of course, it's up to you to stop her. So, basically, that's how you set out on your quest. And in order to do this, you have to retrieve the 8 Essences of Time, is what they're called, which means that you're basically going to be going to 8 dungeons, and fighting off bosses of these dungeons. Going through the dungeons requires solving puzzles, fighting enemies, getting new items to help you explore more, to do more things, to help you ultimately complete the game. And, it's very, very Zelda-esque. I mean, it's a Zelda game, and it does Zelda things you've heard of before. And that's, the basic plot. So the kind of stuff you're doing is going around and adventuring, and there are a lot of secrets, getting heart pieces and such. In fact, it's very reminiscent of Link's Awakening, which actually, most of these assets are pretty much taken right from them, which, interestingly enough, it's actually, this game is made by Capcom. I believe the team was called Flagship, and they're part of Capcom. And they made both of the Oracle's games. So that's kind of interesting that, a different developer was working on these, but still used all of these assets and made some really cool stuff. So it's cool. But there are some different things in these games, and I think I should probably talk about some of those changes. I mean, there are a few items you get in here that you wouldn't necessarily get in other games. One of the ones that you get is the Harp of Ages, which allows you to actually go to different parts of time. And when you first get it, you can only really learn this song to open up these designated portal spots, which will allow you to go either to the present or to the past, depending on where you are when you play it. It just opens up these little portals, and it's an interesting thing to try and add some extra puzzles to the mix, of, trying to know when you're supposed to be. And it's sort of the difference between, like, a light world, dark world type thing, actually. Because both worlds are very similar, both time periods, but sometimes, there's stuff that does exist in one that does not exist in the other. So the whole parallel world thing is definitely there. And of course, as you go on, you get more abilities to manipulate time more effectively, and it makes the puzzles even more interesting with that dynamic, and trying to solve things in one time period and another, and trying to keep going back and forth because you have to do some parts of quests and side quests like in one part, and then go to the other time period to do the other part of it. And there are actually multiple trading sequences in this game as well, which I think is pretty cool. Just because there's usually only like some of the other games have had like one big line of a trading sequence, and this one has basically just a few of them, but they fit in better. It seems like they make more sense that you're doing them, and they don't feel as much of an aside, because there's some of the trading quest stuff is actually stuff you have to do for a few of these smaller sequences are for like the main stuff you're trying to do, the main quest of the game. So it's kind of neat how they're integrated so they don't all feel like this is just a side thing that you have to keep doing for the whole game in order to get something. I think that's cool that they mixed it up, and it doesn't always just feel like, like, oh, I just have to keep trading and trading and trading until I get a thing I need. Like, sometimes it happens sooner, sometimes it's something you need to do, and it's just kind of cool that you can do that. So I did like that. And as well as having this whole big map thing, because already it's twice as big of a map because of the present and past versions. But then there's also this item you get, which is like basically these like flippers, and you're able to swim. You're able to actually swim underwater. You get the ability to do that. So it's not like you just go into the water, you can swim there, but you can dive and then you go under, and there's like a whole like map of like the underwater sections of all these water spots with deep water. And that's also used in a few of the dungeons and stuff too. But the way that's implemented, that means like there's there's the whole overworld and the water there, and the underwater for both the present and the past. So there's like, this is a really big game. There's a lot of stuff in it, and I think that was really cool. There are also a good number of mini games in here, and I know I mentioned the puzzles, but these puzzles are actually there's more of a focus on puzzles in this game, so it's some of these dungeons actually have some really cool and interesting puzzles that I don't think are necessarily like super difficult necessarily. Some of them are head scratchers, but like it's just nice that there's more of those in there, and it feels like a really good balance between the action and the puzzles. And of course, with the side quests and the mini games, there's just lots to do, and there's kind of a collection element in this one because you can get these rings. Basically, there's just the ring system is that you find rings. You can find them in chests or from winning mini games or from these. I guess they're called gasha nuts, which basically you can get gasha seeds, plant them in these spots of soft soil. Some of them are out in the open, some of them are hidden. You plant them there, and you go off and you kill so many number of enemies, and after that much, that was what determines how much time it's been planted. And then basically you come back, and then these gasha nuts can yield better rewards the longer you wait. And sometimes they will give you these rings as well, so there's a lot of randomness of how you can acquire most of them, while some of them you just acquire from specific things. But the rings, what they do is basically you get a ring and you don't know what it is, and so you have to bring it to the jeweler, and then you can get it appraised for 20 rupees. And if you get duplicate rings, he'll just give you 30 rupees, so you get like 10 rupee profit for doing it. But what he'll do is he'll explain what the ring is and what its effect is. So some of the effects are really, really good. They're just like, it's a way to actually like customize your play style. There's things that'll give you some different powers, and there's a few like different outfit type things you can get from them, and there are a lot of rings. I don't remember the exact number, but there are a lot of rings for you to collect, so that's kind of a fun little side thing for you to do and try to get all these different rings in your collection, and you put them in your ring box, and you can get a bigger ring box to hold more at a time. You can only wear one at a time, but you can carry around a few with you. Except if you just have the level 1 ring box, then you can only carry the one with you. So it's an interesting way to try to customize your character and experiment with things like what's going to work for certain areas, on certain bosses, what's going to be valuable to keep on you at all times and everything. And it's a really interesting element to put into the game. And I guess, I don't know, the customization thing is there, and it's neat. I think those are probably the biggest changes in the game, are mostly just those few things with the rings. And I guess that's the most interesting one, just because there really hasn't been much like that in Zelda games that I know of. By the even like after these, I don't know if any that really did something like that. So I think those are especially interesting. Um, the dungeons are cool, with a good mixture of combat and puzzles. They're not just a series of a bunch of challenging fights. It's also some like cool stuff. Like, okay, I think about how do I solve these things, how do I traverse the different parts of these dungeons. Some of them are actually pretty tough, and you might be running around scratching your head for a while on them. But that's probably a good thing, that you have to think about it and you have to try. And it's also cool that like a lot of the bosses, I think most of the bosses are they're multi-form. You don't just fight like one little bit of them. You have to either that, or you have to do like more than just, hey, you got this new item, use this new item only, and you will destroy this boss. Like you have to use, usually like either you have to use multiple items, for like just to hurt them, or you have to use certain items for certain phases of the bosses. So they're like a little more complex, and you don't necessarily always use the thing that you got in the dungeon to beat the bosses. So that's really cool. I think that they implemented that into there because it gives it a more open feel. And it seems like there are multiple ways to attack different bosses as well, especially with the whole customization thing of rings and everything being part of it. So I really really had a good time. Like, it just adds a whole nice sense of like adventure. There's a lot of world building. There's a lot of people to talk to, and like they say different things at different points in time usually, and it's just, of course, there are Gorons and Zoras and all that, and it just feels like a really full experience. It feels like they took a lot of the stuff that was cool about Zelda games, and they just put a bunch of it together and sprinkled a couple of new things on top to really just make these games really make them shine. And I did like that. So it's a really good time, but I guess there are a few issues I have with it, and some of them are pretty minor, like, I guess the whole thing with assets, they're mostly just like Link to the Past stuff, not Link to the Past, mostly like Link's Awakening type assets, just, prettied up a bit, and that's fine, but I can see how you might see that as a little lazy. The beginning is pretty dialogue heavy, which can be a little annoying, and there is a lot of like telling you, okay, go to this place next and do this thing. And they don't always tell you everything. They don't push the stuff as much as some of the other Zelda games might. But the fact that you're just told where to go for every bit of like, okay, I've sensed the next dungeon is this way. It's like, I don't think I really needed that again. Also, I know I'd mentioned the rings and how that's a really cool thing, and it is. But, how he said, a lot of them are good. Well, it's like, more like they're split. There are some rings that are good, that are really helpful. Things that can, like, it seems like there are only, like, a very few that might actually just be good and helpful ones. But it seems like there's very few of those. There are some that are good, but they have trade-offs, like, you can have better defense, but you'll lose some of your attack. You'll have better attack, but you'll lose some of your defense. Trade-off stuff to try and kind of work with your playstyle, I guess. Although you can turn them on and off to try and manipulate that, I suppose. So there are those rings. There are some rings that actually just do negative things, which I guess is nice for a challenge. I suppose if you're really good and you're like, I want this to be difficult, you can put on one of those rings that makes you, just gives you a downgrade, basically, and it's like, yeah, I guess you can try to make the game more difficult for yourself if you'd like. And I think the worst are the rings that don't do anything. There are some rings that like they won't even offer you that extra challenge. At the very least, they just do nothing. They're just there so you can collect them. And it's just kind of a way to try to extend the gameplay, and again, it's kind of artificial. I would have liked if at least all the rings did something. But the fact that some of the rings are there that don't really do anything, a couple of them like turn you into different like monsters, but as far as I can tell, you can't attack when you're one of those monsters, and you're still going to take damage, I believe, when you're near those monsters anyway, so I don't know the point of that other than just goofing around and seeing them. I guess that's neat. It's weird, and I don't know. They're just a little silly. That ring system could have been a lot better, I think. So Some of the puzzles can be a little rough. I guess that's more of like, if you don't want to solve them or if you're getting frustrated with them, I mean, like, it's bound to happen and then that's not going to be fun. But I guess once you figure it out, it'll be rewarding. It's just like some of them are a little annoying. But not too bad. That's very, very much nitpick, and like there was only a few parts where I was really like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, and like I looked it up because I wanted to get this review done. Also, even though this isn't the first time I played the game, but some of the stuff you just forget. And I guess the swimming thing was kind of annoying just because of, and this is going to be a long explanation of that, but just the swimming thing was basically the way you first get, you get like these flippers and you can like swim like normal, like you would in Link's Awakening. And the swimming is that like when you're in the water, you hold the direction and you'll swim that way. And if you tap A, you'll do like some strides and you'll swim faster towards the direction you're facing. And then there are some parts in dungeons and such where you go underwater and it's kind of like a side-scrolly type of view. When you're under the water there, you hit A to, move yourself faster through that water, and you hit B to use items underwater. And then once you get the whole, like, mermaid suit thing to let you go actually under the water in a lot of places, then your swimming thing completely changes. And then it's like you have to keep tapping a direction that you want to go underwater, and you have better control that way. You can actually kind of go faster in that way as well, but it's like you keep tapping those directions. Usually when you're, before you get that, when you hit B, you just dive underwater and you can, duck under enemies and projectiles and stuff by being partially, submerged. But now if you hit that to go underwater, just to dodge enemies, you will just go underwater if it's deep water to the surface, or the screen below. And that's kind of annoying because now you can't use that same, strategy. And also, using items is now switched to A instead of B. So it's weird that it's just totally switched around, that the controls would do that. Like, why wouldn't they make the swimming and, the controls a constant through the entire thing? At least the diving part makes some sense, but, the other parts, it seems weird that they would just completely change, and you might think your game is kind of bugged if you didn't understand the switch from those. Also, sometimes it can get a little rough on your thumb if you're swimming around in places and you don't know what to do. Like specifically the dungeon where you're going underwater a lot, I was kind of stuck in there and my thumb started to hurt from tapping that direction every time to swim because I didn't know what I was supposed to do necessarily, and that was kind of frustrating because I don't know why. It seemed like a good idea to put a water dungeon in. People are so receptive to water dungeons. So yeah, that part was a little annoying, but most of my complaints are pretty minor. I think the only thing with that is mostly just perhaps you should fix that, that ring thing. That would have been nice. So I guess I didn't really have that much negative to say about the game. I mean, we didn't have that much to really explain either. A lot of it is if you liked Link's Awakening, you'll probably like Oracle of Ages. It does a lot of that stuff, and it just does more. And that's good. It does a lot of really cool stuff, and it's just a really full game, and it's big, and it's awesome. If you like Link's Awakening, definitely check it out. And just if you're curious, I think these are also on the eShop. So Oracle of Ages, I think it's $6 or something on the 3DS eShop. Check it out. It's really fun, and for that price, that is awesome. I forgot I was supposed to hold this up at this point. Oh well, I'll figure it out in post. It's a lot of fun. And I definitely like this one the most of the two, which is why I talked about it first. And I will say that this game, even though it's a linked kind of connected thing, this game still has a really satisfying ending. You beat there's a big final boss fight with multiple forms, and it's difficult, but it's really fun. And the whole ending of it is actually still pretty satisfying. As just a standalone experience. there is a little bit more to this, I suppose. And I guess you might feel a little cheated from like this little end thing after the credits, but it's not enough to diminish all of the fun and great things that happen in the game. And I think that's a really key thing to remember, is that it's good that these were standalone games that were made to be connected, not just games that were meant to be connected the entire time. And they don't depend on each other to be fun experiences. So you're totally fine just getting one of them if you would rather. I mean, leave whatever you want in the comments, I suppose. You know, which one you like better and whatever, and all that good stuff. And next time we're going to get into Oracle of Seasons and talk about some of the connectivity between the two. So I'll see you guys in part 2. And, I mean, that should be like tomorrow if I did these right. And, you know, just have a blast with the rest of Zelda month.